Thank you. I'd like to call the meeting to order. This is the School District of Waukesha Finance and Facilities Committee meeting on the Board of Education. It's Monday, January 9th, 2023. Have we been properly posted?
Yes, we have.
Thank you. I got that in stereo. That's nice. Assures me that both ears are working.
All afternoon just to hit it.
It's right.
That's right.
Here we go. And we're going to start off our meeting with opportunity for public comment. Is there anyone that has signed up? Okay, thank you. We'll move right into our action items. The first action item tonight is approval of minutes from our December 12th meeting. Do I have a motion of approval?
So moved.
Mr. McCaffrey, is there a second?
Second.
Ms. Kozlowski seconds. Is there any changes or modifications to those minutes? Okay, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Passes 4-0. Oh, and I forgot to mention that Mrs. Robertson is excused from the meeting tonight. She is not feeling well. There's a lot of stuff going around these days. Yes, we're all going, nodding our heads. We'll move on to our next action item, which is approval of vouchers. Sherry, have we any questions that were called in?
Yep, we have some questions, so we'll get right to those. First one was on voucher number 351665, Chatterbox Speech and Language for $13,656.26. And the question was, what is Chatterbox and who's using it? Chatterbox Speech and Language is a company that provides staffing for specialized positions. And in this case, we are using it for a speech pathologist. We have someone out on leave, and we were unable to hire that position. There just was no qualified candidates. So we had to go to a company to provide a contractor. So we have a contracted service with them.
Okay, any other questions on that? Yes, Mrs. Kozlowski?
Thank you, Sherry. So this $13,000, is this a monthly fee?
I don't know. I will check on that. I would assume it is a monthly, but let me double check on that. I'm sorry, I didn't think to pull that.
I'd like to understand the contract and the fee that's associated with that. If it's hourly, is it based on salary and the duration that we expect to use services when we're outsourcing?
Okay, duration. Oh, yes.
We have an answer?
Yes.
Dr. Cook, welcome.
So yeah, these contracted positions are billed on an hourly rate. When you go through an agency, the hourly rate is much higher, which is why you see the amount that you see. We had posted, going into the summer, looking forward, we had posted for positions, but they went unfilled for many months, and we had to make a decision as we got closer and closer to the start of that leave time. So it's hourly, it'll be for the duration of the leave. I believe the leave in this case is about a 12-week leave. So you'll see that bill come in on a monthly basis, or every 5 or 6 weeks or so, just depending on what that cycle looks like.
Good. And who approves the time cards for hourly? I assume?
My office does.
Okay. And hours are maintained to 40 hours a week, approved of exception?
They're as needed to fill the IEP services, so they may not go up to 40 hours a week. They may be specific to the services,
okay,
because we've had to Band-Aid in some evaluations for this leave as well.
But they don't go over?
They do not go over it and do an overtime.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And I think this was one of those hot spots that Sharon was identifying over the summer, right? That as we were she was communicating to us where we were having issues hiring. I think this was
school
one where
psych,
she
social
indicated.
workers, speech and language pathologists in particular are difficult to fill positions right now.
Yeah.
And aides, special education aides, we are also using a contracted service for them because they having difficult time filling the positions.
Okay. Okay. Thank you on that. Any other questions or comments on this voucher? Okay, Sherry. Thank you, Joe, on that.
Thank you. Critical Response Group voucher 351957, Joe's going to wait there just in case, but and for $48,675.50. This is a contracted service with this company to provide digital mapping, and digital mapping is putting all of our buildings into a digital map that can be downloaded by law enforcement during a critical incident. It can go to their phones, it can go to any other electronic device that they have. It's part of Wisconsin Act 109 to do this, and this is being funded by a grant through the Department of Justice for $110,000, and the grant is fully paying for this.
Okay. And we've been working on this for a while, this documentation, right? A couple of years?
Our first conversation with the police chief was a couple of years ago, right when the legislation was trying to get some legs under it. And what it also does is allow, if there's a emergency response, and Joe can add, I'll probably miss some things, it allows them to see where their squads are. They can coordinate the response.
Squads and bodies in the
Yeah.
building.
Do you know how far along we are with that? How close to completion? or-
Early stages, but it won't take long to complete.
Yeah. We have, part of our net request, facility software already has our floor plans and everything in it, so we'll be saving, actually just been talking about it on Monday, we'll be saving that information with them, or have already, since we've met. And I would think this would be a pretty quick turnaround. but-
Yeah, from start to completion, they estimated that it would take about 3 weeks to do our district. Plus or minus, just depending, it took a little bit longer to start it up because the grant was allocated to the schools a little bit later than what they had anticipated, but we're on schedule based off of when we were able to get grant approval and then access the time of the company.
Okay. And it is statute-driven?
It's,
Did I hear that or not?
it's,
Funding is, right,
the funding is through the DOJ. So it's just taking a little bit of time out of some staff here at the district to apply for the grant and monitor it, but they're paying for everything.
Okay.
and it's part of a larger effort. The city's also doing the same thing with their facilities, so it's bigger than just us doing it as an isolated set of locations.
Sure. Any other questions or comments on this voucher? Okay, Sherry?
Okay, the next voucher is a question on several vouchers to first student that we paid, and the questions were, can we clarify how the payment cycle works for the first student contract? And, we paid $700,000 in September and then $1.25 million in December. So there's two different aspects to first student billing. One is field trips, co-curricular. Those come in on an individual invoice. They're sent right to the schools. The schools review them, approve them, and send them to the business office. That's a smaller component of all this. The big component is our home-to-school transportation contract. And billing has been an issue in the past with first students. So, for example, that September invoice was actually money from June. The June bill didn't come in until September. They have replaced the person that was doing the billing, and we have a new person who seems very sharp. But in the transition, they lost who was all supposed to be getting the invoices. And so they normally went to our AP person and to me. I just let the AP person handle it. I didn't realize they were no longer going to the AP person. They were only coming to me. So this one is a little bit on us that it got behind, but I worked with the new person. She's awesome. She added the AP person right away to the invoices. They got our December bill to us the first week of January. So I fully expect that moving forward, we will be getting our bills in a timely fashion so that we'll get the bill the month following the service and pay it that next month. And so I think that we will see a great improvement in this cycle.
Okay. Any questions or comments? Mrs. Kozlowski?
Thank you. So interesting. So the June payment that came in September, is that crossing fiscal years?
Yes.
So $700,000 essentially should have been in the budget and the financial results for last year, and it will be this year.
Actually, we worked through our auditor and did the accrual.
We did.
Yep, so we're clean.
Thank
We
you.
did the accrual after that September, the September report came out. So.
Okay. And then just confirming, so we expect to have the cash outflow for pupil transportation monthly, right? So you get an annual contract, we're not paying it up front.
No, it's based on the actual
Usage and,
usage.
okay, perfect, that's all I had, thank you.
And then Yvonne
there's a-
Johnson in Transportation reviews all the bills before we pay them, to go through and make sure that the routes look accurate, the number of riders are accurate, and so we have that set of eyes on it before it gets approved.
I think there's a third part to the contract, though, too, right, in terms of billing and payment. We have the extracurriculars, the normal day transportation, and then fuel. Isn't that completely separate? Can you
Yes.
go over that and what we do there?
Fuel is just a separate bill, a separate invoice, and it's, every month it's based on the actual fuel costs and the actual usage of the buses.
And we do try and buy that in bulk, right, the fuel, or not?
I can't speak
Think
to
so. I don't
that.
think they have-
It's not like our natural gas where we do that?
No, we don't do anything of that nature. I don't think on that terminal site they have the capacity to do the long, to have it there on site and have large purchasing. We've never talked about it with them at all. I did today as part of a later agenda item, but other than that,
And in the past, it's been purely propane, but the last two bills has been a blend of propane and diesel. Diesel being a much smaller percentage of the invoice than propane, but they must have switched some of their buses out.
Yeah, I meant propane, not natural gas.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm in the ballpark,
I didn't mean that way.
No, I didn't take it that way. I was correcting myself. Fair enough. Anything else on this particular voucher? Okay, Sherry?
Moving on to the next voucher was Waukesha County Department of Parks and Land Use, and the question had to do with the Waukesha Wings, which is the boys hockey team, and it had to do with how is this team structured and how much is the district paying, because it seemed a higher cost. So we actually have just been looking into Waukesha Wings. It is a co-op, and it includes our three high schools plus Catholic Memorial High School. The only thing that the district funds out of district money is the coach salary and benefits. Waukesha Catholic pays a co-op fee, and then the rest of the revenue comes from donations, admissions to the games, which is significant. They must draw a lot of people. And the co-op fee are the three main revenue sources. But we do put it all into our Fund 21, which is where we put all of our co-curricular type things. And so that's why the checks, you're seeing them come out of AP, but it's money that they've raised themselves and are using it to pay the expenses. The cost to our students is the $150 athletic fee. And that's, if they participate in more than one sport, they only pay the $150.
Questions or comments on that?
Okay.
I do
Yes.
just have a
Dr.
comment,
Yasin.
just because I know there's been people looking at all the back and forth. I don't think that's entirely correct, the player fees, because there's this supplemental player fee that goes through the wings, and that's how they reimburse us for ice and other things, and it's upwards of $2,000, plus they pay uniforms. So it's a lot, because there's ice fees and there's other transactions and things that go through. So I do think that it's appropriate that we spend a little bit more time just understanding and making sure that what the students are paying in fees to the co-op is flowing back to the expenses that the district has. It appears that we're getting reimbursed for the things that we're spending it on. That's not the issue.
Yep, in the revenue stream, I saw nothing that showed student direct payments, so we'll have to do a
They
little.
pay it to the wings. Not to
it goes to the
us.
wings. And then Wings uses those dollars to reimburse us along with admissions.
Which is different from how we handle our swim co-op. And probably we should understand why those are different and maybe try to,
Yeah, we can bring back a report on that. It is a unique thing, and it's I'm assuming, when this all started, it's the unique costs associated with hockey, right? Ice time is incredibly expensive. Wings runs, just another example, they run the events, the sporting events. We don't staff them. They take care of all that. So there's some nuances to that agreement or arrangement that we can bring back or send out as a Friday update or however you'd like to see it. Because it is different. The closest I could compare it would be lacrosse, I guess. But
I think a Friday update's
Yeah.
fine. Is that okay with you guys then?
The issue with that is they don't own the ice. That's what's different with the sports.
Right, they rent.
We own the pool itself. The wings, they don't own their own ice, so that's why it's so expensive. Because they don't own it, they have to rent it.
But it's very
Unless you're
similar to
paying
how we
in-
handle girls' golf, for example, right? You know,
Yes.
co-op between
Yep.
schools, they
Yep.
pay an incremental fee to the district to cover greens fees.
Yep.
In the event of hockey, though, the incremental player fees actually go to the co-op and not
Yes,
to the
and not to the
district.
school.
And so we don't have visibility to that,
That's correct.
but we do have responsibility for that, so. But yes, I would appreciate,
yeah, we'll send another update, and if we end up wanting it agendized, we can certainly do that.
Okay, anything else on this voucher? All right. Sherry, next one?
The next one is for niche.com for $10,490. And what are we using this for? This particular company provides, it allows your name to come up more when a web search is done. So someone goes into Google and searches schools in my area. Niche.com gets involved in the search and can help get your listing higher up in the priority on the page. And they pull as much data from the public sources as they can. So you'd still come up, but we pay a annual subscription fee because we can then go in and we can modify our landing page for that. We can add in specialized search criteria so that it can be more specialized to what words you're hitting on and gives you a higher percentage of hits that come up higher on the list. So it's really for visibility, it's marketing.
So is the district working directly with niche.com, or is this going through another third-party vendor?
We pay niche.com directly. I would have to, my understanding, but I guess I'd like to confirm this with Mary Jo, is that we work directly with niche.com.
Okay. I'd be curious on that.
Okay.
Any other questions on niche.com? Yes, Mrs. Kozlowski?
Thank you. It appears I have a lot of questions today.
That's okay.
So when we were talking through marketing, I think it was quite a while ago, just from a budgetary standpoint, right, we were talking about budget costs that we have, and most of the marketing costs were dedicated towards eAchieve. So this is, outside of that, I would say this is district-wide. I'd like to understand then, for programs that are outside of eAchieve, what our marketing costs and what we're looking at this one. This one was new for me to take a look at and understand, you know, are we tracking it? What's the viability of it? Do we get good hits and responses and engagement, right, as we start to face the budget now coming up and we start talking about enrollment? Is there a link between using this and what we're actually seeing come to fruition within student headcount?
Link, pun intended? All right.
Good for a couple.
Good question, though. Good question.
And follow up with Mary Jo on this and get the information back.
And we, just to give some background information, I guess this was pre-COVID, several board members and, 'cause I was just looking, advertising, we budget $387,000, I would guess
Majority of that is
90% of that is probably
Yeah.
eAchieve. So, but we sat down with eAchieve and went through, but that's been a few years ago too, so we'll provide you some additional information, and maybe it's time to bring eAchieve back to talk about, you know, what their strategies are as well.
Now, the district marketing budget is not big. I believe it's around $80,000 a year that is used for district-wide marketing, and that is where this falls
And
under.
that probably includes having a web page and
Yes.
not
It's-
mailings and commercials and things like that. It's, a lot of it's more operational type.
It does include mailings, and it includes anything that would, you know, with our,
Like some of the brochures we print up.
it includes all of that. Pardon? Yeah, newsletter.
Newsletters, sure.
So it isn't, when Darren's talking about the cost, that particular marketing cost is eAchieve. So they're big numbers, but, and eAchieve also works with niche under their own umbrella versus the district. And they do their own contract with them.
That's why I was asking if we went through a third party or not, and it looks like we might not be going through a third party, we might be working directly with Niche, but I didn't know if, like, for example, for eAchieve, if it was going through that third party, if, again, we were direct, so I'd just be curious.
Yep,
That's
I
all.
will follow up on that.
Anything else in this voucher? All right, next, Sherry?
Next one is for National Louis University for $23,180. And the question was what staff training was provided. I'm going to need a little more time to get to the information because I played telephone tag with the people that have the details. But we've worked with National Louis University for several years now, and the training is paid for with Title I money, and I know that it has to do with the Title I program, but not exclusively. So I don't want to speak out of turn. I'd like a little extra time and can have Darren get that back to you in a Friday update if you would like it back that way, or however you want me to provide the information.
I think that'll work.
Okay. And then the final one is Bloom of Minnesota, and the question was, who are these wired tablets for $40,000? This is a case of a really poor description on an invoice. These were actually for keyboards for iPads, and it was a total of 1,020 keyboards at $38 each, and they're for students. And in addition, there was a 65-inch interactive TV for East and 2 for West included in this particular money. But the description is really bizarre because it does say wired tablets, but it is keyboards for iPads.
Okay. Any other questions on this voucher? Comments? All right. Appreciate those questions on the vouchers. I'd be looking for a motion to approve.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Dr. Piasek. Further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Okay, passes 4-0. Thanks for digging up those answers, Sherry, and we can never ask too many questions. That's our job. So, thank you, Sherry. Appreciate it. Moving on to our discussion and information items for 2023, 2024. Each year, actually, we have to publish our open enrollment projections. And Dr. Cook, you're going to be taking that one, as always. This will be your last year doing that for us. You get to do it somewhere else next year.
Maybe unless there's somebody else who does it there already, and this might be my end of open enrollment then, so.
There you go. Even better, right?
Yeah, it's been fun. So yes, annually, we have to come to you to present our open enrollment projections and seek your approval as a whole board. Up until 5 years ago, this process was done on the general business items in the whole board, and then there was a request at that time to put it in a committee to discuss it first. So I'm here with our numbers. I'll project those up for you so that you can see what I am referencing. If you give me a second, I will make that bigger for everybody. Maybe. So it is in board docs, so if you have it pulled up on your computer, we'll talk through it. So the School District of Waukesha, we come here every January to present these seat allocations to you and seek your approval. The Waukesha STEM Academy, Montessori School of Waukesha, we conduct a lottery for seats in those locations. Families, it's important to know for the board, the families cannot apply to the school district for a specific program or a specific school. They can apply to the district. Once we accept them, then we can assign them to a location in the district. We try to honor requests as we can with space. eAchieve has unlimited availability, so, excuse me, any family seeking a seat at eAchieve will get that seat at eAchieve. For grade levels where we do not have space in our brick and mortar schools, we will hold that student's application on a waiting list, and then we will offer them a seat in eAchieve. So as a school district, generally, we do not deny anybody a space in the school district of Waukesha. Grade by grade, and I apologize that it's not projecting, but it's on your chart. In 4-year-old kindergarten, we have 40 seats available in the monolingual program. In 5K, we have 12 seats available, 3 dual language. In first grade, I'll read the monolingual number first and then the dual number second, 40 and 23. In second grade, 25 and 0. In third grade, 14 and 24. In fourth grade, 1 and 30. Currently, our projections have no space in 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. In 9th grade, we have 18 monolingual seats and 0 dual seats. In 10th grade, we have 8 available. It's important to note when we figure this calculation, we look at what our current enrollment is, and we factor that against the capacity, the number of teachers that we have across those sections. So when you see some grades that don't have any space, what we're trying to do is avoid adding staff if we can. And if we have numbers there, we're looking at smaller numbers in the sense that if we add too many students to that grade level, we might tip that whole grade level then over where you're going to create hot spots. So as we go through the next several months, I work with Sharon on this. We take the enrollment projections. Stephanie Peterson does an excellent job with that. We look at our sectioning reports, how many teachers we need, how many kids are going to be in each section, what the course selection is like at the secondary level, and then we start to place things and figure out what our staffing is. So, I'm sorry, you see this as the open enrollment seats. We also have to go through and review our special education allocations. And based off of the numbers, and we've talked about this at Student Services and a number of other committees, teaching and learning, we've seen more and more students be identified as needing a special education need. So at all grade levels, we go through a calculation, the class size limit, what we look at for an ideal caseload, the number of teachers that we have working at that level, and then the total number of students. And so then we have essentially projected that we do not have any space for open enrollment in the area of special education. As a school district through board policy, if a student does become identified in the district, we have a conversation, do we have then space in that particular program for the student if they're here under open enrollment? So you can see in your document then how we break down in the area of special ed. We do offer all students with disabilities who apply to our district an opportunity to go to eAchieve. We do provide full special education services at eAchieve. So we, again, don't have to deny anybody. We place them on a wait list and then see if there's space down the road.
So when we submit this to the state, what do they do with it?
They hold it and post it at the state level. So they have a chart that shows what the school district of Waukesha approved.
Okay.
It does become tricky because we approved this in January, and this, for rest of the winter, the spring and the summer happen, and you end up with your enrollment numbers at that particular point. We always can add more students to a grade level, even if we decide to close it, based off of what we have from a teacher allocation standpoint, but this is the minimum then that we can do at that grade level.
Other questions or comments on this? Mrs. Kozlowski?
Thank you. So when we submit this to the state, can we talk a little bit about funding? A lot of the things that we hear about is that we are not adequately funded to support our IEPs. How does that process work?
So, I mean, open enrollment, the transfer in for a student with a disability, the average transfer in, and Darren and Sherry kind of help me with this, but it's about $8,000 per pupil. If you accept a student with a disability, it's about $12,000 per pupil. That cost then helps provide educational services above and beyond what the general curricular experience would be, the math, science, social studies. So it's there to support the cost of special education related services. When you hear about the funding issue, though, that we get out of the state, it comes down into the categorical reimbursement conversation. So back in the 90s, special education was funded at somewhere around 65, 70% reimbursement. It got as low as about 25%, and I think right now it's at somewhere 27, 28% categorical reimbursement. And so that's the discussion that we get. The reduction in categorical reimbursement at the state level over time has resulted in an increased responsibility of the local LEA, the school district, to fund the special education services. So because the state cut back, the local monies go higher, and then when you get to that annual transfer from Fund 10 to Fund 27, that's where you see that number come in that $18, $19 million range. And that would be much lower if the categorical reimbursement were back where it was in the mid-90s.
Thanks. And just a wild card question out. What are we doing to reach out to the state to ask for this to be increased? Who kind of owns that piece?
My professional association, WCAS, has spoken with state officials every year on it. I know the Superintendent's Association has done that. Whenever we've had conversations with our local representatives, we've mentioned the need to increase categorical reimbursement.
That's effectively all we can do, right?
There's very little recourse. The federal government doesn't fund it at what the federal government's responsibility is, and the state government doesn't fund it at the state government's responsibility. So it leaves it to the local LEA to pay for it.
Our state organizations formed another organization that lobbies in Madison for it. We're also a member of the
Sousa,
I never really.
the southeastern
Another
Wisconsin,
lobbying
yeah.
effort that we contract with. And then we meet with local legislators, the Governmental Relations Committee, which is no longer, we met with, had us meet with elected representatives as well, and that was a topic of conversation. So pretty normal cycle, every biennial budget, so. And this is a normal topic as well, because it's seen as an unfunded mandate.
It's been happening a long time, very long time, and don't get much traction. It is difficult to watch that $18 or $19 million being transferred out of Fund 10 or general fund over now. But with that said, those services are needed. Those students need those services. So, but it does take away from quite a bit from our general fund each and every year. Unfortunately, not much traction on it. Dr. Piasek.
Thank you. How does the open enrollment projection or capacity projection affect the decisions that we make about interdistrict school choice?
The interdistrict school choice, the secondary approval just happened today. So we take care of interdistrict school choice first, and then the open enrollment window closes, and then the kids who are coming here on open enrollment have essentially the placement of whatever happens after that. So we handle our internal first, and then open enrollment comes second.
Do you evaluate the trends on open enrollment at the?
I do. I wish that the screen mirroring would work today. I can kind of talk you through a couple of the data points. We just actually ran this at the end of last week as we start to have some bigger budgetary discussions. Annually, we receive open enrollment students from 306 school districts. That might be one student a year, or we have record, I'm sorry, over the last 5 years, we have record that we receive students from 306 school districts.
That's including eAchieve.
That is correct. That includes eAchieve. eAchieve does bring in the bulk, the vast majority of that. So in 2018, 2019, we had 173 students open enroll in to our brick and mortar schools. We had 956 students open enroll in to eAchieve for a total of 1,129 students. I would say, if I'm looking at these numbers, and I haven't dug into it too much, but I'll report to you that Banting as a school in 2018-19 had 31 students there on eAchieve. Presumably, a lot of that is due to the dual language placement that is there. South High School had 13 STEM, K-8 had 20 students. West High School had 20. White Rock 4K had 25, and the Montessori School of Waukesha had 11. So we have that arrangement, the tuition arrangement with them. During the 1920 school year, we had 202 students here under open enrollment. It's important to note that's not 202 new students. That's the 18-19 kids plus then whatever else came in. We had 969 students here going to eAchieve, 1,171 total. In the 2021 school year, 229 brick and mortar, 1,241 to eAchieve, total 1,470. This was the COVID year. eAchieve was a very popular location for students that year, so we saw an increase in enrollment that year. During 21-22, 264 brick and mortar, 1,183 eAchieve, 1,447 total. Again, we were experiencing higher numbers at eAchieve in particular due to the COVID year. And then this year we had 325 brick and mortar. We saw more kids come here in brick and mortar. That jumped up quite a bit for us. And then 787 students to eAchieve, and a total of 1,112 total. And then I'll report to you the kind of the higher school districts that we have out. Kettle Moraine, the total number over the last 4 years, and now please know that this is not year plus year plus year. This is just the total number of kids who have open enrolled out. Some kids are counted twice. And I'll kind of read down the number. In 1920, we had 194 kids go to Kettle Moraine. In 2020, it was 201. In 21, it was 211. In 22, it was 217. In 23, it was 230. And the grand total then, if you take each kid and you add them up over time, if that is a number that makes any sense for us, it was 1,053. And that has a budgetary impact. I mean, when you look at all those years over time. Pewaukee was the next highest, 177, 169, 169, 160, 173. Mugwanago, 45.
Ms. Kozlowski?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Just real quick, Joe.
Before you, because I'm writing this grid, right, this will be something that you're going to share with us. I've asked for it. Right?
Definitely. I saw your email from Sunday,
Okay.
and we just put it together at the end of last week, so we haven't had a whole lot of time to play with it, but it'll definitely be shared on a Friday update with you.
No, and that's perfect, so I don't
Okay.
have to keep.
No, I just want to
But
give you some
these are really great metrics for us to understand, and it gives us a very good blueprint or landscape as to coming and going, and then what we expect for this next cycle.
Sure. Mugwanago is the next one, and then Elmbrook, and then the Milwaukee Public Schools. So Mugwanago this past year had 60 of our kids, Elmbrook 23, the Milwaukee Public Schools 31. As I look at this kind of on the surface and take a look at these numbers here, I mean, we do have a perimeter, in the district. We have our neighbors that people have selected, but there's some school districts on here, some schools on here, that they offer virtual opportunities. And so the question that I have then, and some of the work that we'll do internally, like McFarland runs the Virtual Academy. They're the 6th highest school on here. This past year, their numbers are down a little bit, but they were 15, 27, 38, 27, and 18, all for virtual instruction. There are some other school districts on here that have a small virtual program attached to them that are relatively high in the grand scheme of open enrollment. And so that'll be some follow-up work, conversations we have with eAchieve as to what are we doing internally for these kids that are deciding to go elsewhere, and why are they making that particular choice? What about the eAchieve program? What reasons do they have for not selecting that?
Dr. Piasek?
Thank you. That was helpful. I want to reiterate the first part of my question, though, because I think I might not have phrased it the right way. When you mentioned plus 31 at Banting, does that include students that are already within district boundaries but may have been in a catchment area for a different elementary school?
No, this is only open enrollment. It is not school choice.
Okay. And so do we have the same table for inter-district choice? Because I think those trends seem to be moving also.
Yeah, we do have that data as well. I'd be happy to
Could you
either
share
provide that in an update or come back and present that, for instance, at Student Services this month. I can talk about it there so that you can see what we're doing from an in-district school choice. Secondary will be done for this year. The elementary has yet to be drawn. It's just a little bit different of a dynamic at the elementary with course selection. At the secondary, we have to do the choice window first, and then course selection at the secondary, and then we get into the staffing at the secondary. So we follow that sequence so we know how many kids, for instance, are at Butler Middle School, North High School, West High School, and that's the kind of the sequence that we follow. So secondary will be done. You won't see elementary for the 23-24 school year at this time.
Okay.
We just don't get into that commitment component of it. It holds a little bit longer is what I'm saying. Same timeline, just holds a little longer.
For in-district secondary choice.
That comes right now.
First, yeah.
Yep. Elementary is making their choice right now, but we don't commit to sectioning of it yet because there's not an FTE implication the way it is at the secondary. A school course selection.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
Other questions or comments on open enrollment projections for next year? Thank you, Dr. Cook. Appreciate that.
You're welcome. Have a good evening.
You too. Moving on to our 2021-2022 audit report. Baker Tilly is our auditing firm, and I see Wendy Younger is present with us. Darren, are you going to kick this off, or are you going to kick it right over to Wendy, or is that Miss
I'm good standing.
Miss Stack, or
Sit all day.
are you guys going to arm wrestle to?
I'll just introduce, this is Wendy Unger. She's a partner with Baker Tilly and also runs heads up the audit for the School District of Waukesha. This is our third year now with Baker Tilly, and she's here to give us an update on how our audit went. And
Welcome.
we received the physical books at last month's board meeting, and then there were electronic copies. There's a presentation. You're going to have to pull it up in board docs if this is not working, so. Take it away,
All
Wendy.
right.
Thank
Well,
you.
Happy New Year, everyone. Thank you for having me here this evening. As was mentioned, as part of the audit process, we issued two documents. One is the audited financial statements. One is a reporting and insights document. I'm going to go through both of those using the handout that is included in your information at a relatively high level. Please ask any questions as I go through. I'll do my best to answer those. So the information that I intend to share tonight, going to go again over some audit results, some very high-level financial information. I've included a couple different points towards the back of the presentation that I think are important for you to be aware of, and then I will again open it up for questions. As I go through the presentation, I will make reference to certain pages within your audited statements. A lot of information in there, so I just want you to have the ability to know where I'm getting the information and to be able to look at your leisure. So the audit results. The objective of the audit was to issue an opinion on the financial statements for the School District of Waukesha. We did that. Included in your audited statements is a clean, unmodified opinion, highest level of assurance that you can obtain from us as your auditors. That clean, unmodified opinion, which is the same type of opinion that the district has received in the past, means that the information contained within the audited statements is believed to be materially accurate. Generally accepted accounting principles have been adhered to. All the disclosures that are required to be included within the financial statements have, and that accounting principles have been consistently applied from year to year. When I mentioned that, if those that were here last year, we talked about a new governmental accounting standard that would be effective for the district for FY22. That was GASB 87 and the accounting for leases. We did evaluate the implication of that standard for the district, and based on the information provided in our evaluation, that was determined to be immaterial to the financial statements and therefore was not incorporated. We will talk about another new standard that will be effective towards the end of the presentation. So on the next page, this is where I've highlighted the general fund activity for the district. As you can see, I've presented the first column being the actual results, second column is budget, third column is the variance between actual and budget. As you can see, almost $162 million of actual revenue compared to a $153 million budget. You were 8 million, almost 7.7, 7.8 million over budget within your revenue, within your general fund. Several reasons for that. One, there was the settlement with TIF 14 through the city. That was 2.25 million that you did not anticipate. Your open enrollment, we just talked about that, came in over budget by roughly 1.3 million. Compared to what you anticipated. You also received additional funding through the state, through the government's the governor's COVID funding. That was an additional 2 million. And then you had some other revenue category. You had some flood insurance reimbursement. That was 870,000, and then an additional 1.5 in E-rate claims that came through. So again, all very positive scenarios for 2022. Expenditures, very close to budget, $551,000 in the grand scheme of things when you look at the $155 million budget. So very close, nothing I'm going to draw your attention to there. When you look at what you anticipated to do when you put together your FY22 budget, you budgeted to use fund balance. Budgeted to use 1.25 million of fund balance to balance your budget. Ultimately, for 2022, you added 7.1 million to your fund balance, so a positive swing of 8.3 million. So a very favorable result. When you add that to the beginning of the year fund balance, the general fund ended the year at 56.6 million of fund balance. On the presentation, I've broken out the various components of that. There's a portion of that that's referred to as non-spendable. Those are monies that have been spent for prepaid expenditures, so an expense you paid for in 2022 that really is 2023. Think of that as like your insurance. You have to pay that ahead of time. The other portion of that is inventory that sits on your balance sheet, gets recognized as an expense as you utilize it, but in both of those cases, cash is gone. So it is not a portion of fund balance that you had. That's $564,000 of that 56.6 million. Another smaller portion, 33,000, is restricted. That's your common school fund carryover. That needs to be set aside. It can only be used for its purpose. And then the remaining balance unassigned is $56 million. That represents roughly 36% of your operating budget. You have a policy to have a minimum percentage available for working capital and cash flow of 10 to 15%. So you're well in compliance with your policy, and again, ended the year very favorably in the general fund. On the next page, I've highlighted the remaining funds of the district. Special education is the first column there, 28.8 million of revenue, 28.8 million of expenditures. As was discussed previously, a good portion of that 28 million comes in from your general fund. 18 million came in. I will note that that 18 million was roughly $2 million less than what you had anticipated during the budget process. So there was less transfer in, but again, a significant portion is general fund funding. The remaining portion is federal and state revenue that you receive for your special education program. The special education fund had zero fund balance. That is what it is required to have under DPI guidelines, and therefore ended as expected. The next column is the referendum capital project fund. That fund had 3.8 million of fund balance as of the beginning of the year. All those monies were expended during the year, and that fund had zero fund balance as of the end of the year. So the referendum monies are now gone, and that fund is zero. The last column that I presented here is titled non-major governmental funds. So look at this as all the remaining funds of the district. There is an extensive schedule, a balance sheet and income statement in the back of your report found on page 41. But I have highlighted in the presentation the various components of that. So when you look at this, this is your donations fund, the Fund 21 that Sherry mentioned previously, your food service fund, your community service fund, your other capital project funds, and your debt service funds. All of those funds, except for your debt service funds, all increased positive fund balance during the year. All of them saw a nice increase in fund balance. Your long-term capital improvement fund saw a $251,000 increase. You transferred money out of your general fund into your long-term capital fund, so $250,000 of that is a transfer in. But again, overall, all of those funds saw a nice increase. Food services up $2.28 million over the previous year, and as I mentioned, your debt service funds saw a slight decrease in fund balance of roughly $83,000, as you would expect as you use those monies to cover your debt service requirements. On the next page of the presentation, this is where I've highlighted some other information, and this is, again, at a very high level, so I'm going to give you some page references where this information is included. But the first item I've included here is your capacity and ability to borrow. I think it's important for the district to realize you have a limit as to what you can borrow. It's 10% of your equalized value, which equates to $1.24 billion. You have roughly 20... Yes, just slightly. You have roughly 28 million of general obligation debt outstanding, so the difference between those two figures is the ability to borrow. So I note that. That is included in your footnote, in your debt footnote on page 19. Your total OPEB liability, this is the liability the district has for other post-employment benefits to retirees. This is done and calculated through an actuarial service, so we utilize that data and do various census testing on that study. At the end of 2022, that liability was $39.3 million, down $8.3 million over the previous year. And again, an extensive footnote on page 27 of your footnotes detailing the activity.
Just to put that in perspective, I don't have an exact year, but at our highest point in time, I think we're at 194 million. This was probably 2005, 2006, 2007. So just to kind of put that into perspective, you know, we've come a long ways on that liability over the years. And this is for all the people who've ever worked for us is what that total number comes to. And obviously people roll onto that schedule and roll off that schedule. That's continuously changing, but that's good news. This is a good dollar
in the right
amount.
direction.
Yes.
The next item I've noted here is the district participates in Wisconsin retirement system. You do record per GASB 68, a governmental accounting standard 68, you do have to record your portion of the system's activities. So as of the end of FY22 and previous year also, the district has an asset recorded on its books of $41.4 million. Again, all based on actuarial data provided to us through Wisconsin retirement system. This isn't necessarily an asset you have any right to. Likewise, if it was a liability, it's not a liability you have to pay. That number fluctuates based on the investment activity. So when the system is overfunded, you record an asset. When the system is underfunded, you record a liability. But the last several years, the system has been in a positive scenario, so you, along with all the other participants, record your proportionate share, and again, that data is given to us by WRS. Page 21 of your footnotes, again, extensive information regarding that program. The last item regarding footnotes is your single employer pension plan. This is your smaller stipend plan. As of the end of the year, that was $1.38 million, and that is essentially a break even for the year. It did see a small increase of $88,000. So again, based on actuarial data, and again, there is a footnote there. The last item that I'm going to note from a financial statement standpoint before I switch gears to the reporting and insights document is the district expends roughly $14 million of federal funds, $70.7 million of state funds. Because you're over a $750,000 threshold, you are required to have a federal compliance audit. And because we live in the wonderful state of Wisconsin, you are also required to have a state compliance audit. Included in your audited statements beginning on page 48 are the schedule of federal and state awards. On an annual basis, we are required to evaluate programs from size, risk, and newness to the district and test those for compliance with the various requirements. So for FY22, We tested child nutrition, we tested Medicaid, the ESSER funding, and also Title I. So every 3 years, based on size, we are required to look at various programs. So some years you may have more than others, but again, those 4 were evaluated. On the state side, always have to look at general aid. That is a requirement. Doesn't matter how much you get, but as you are well aware, that is one of the larger funding sources. Common School Library Fund also has to be tested, and then your special education funding through the state. So those were the 3 programs we looked at. Very happy to say no compliance findings related to either the federal or state programs. So just wanted to draw your attention to that. And again, beginning in the back of that portion of the financials is where all that information is.
Mrs. Kozlowski?
Great, thank you. I'll allow you opportunity to catch your breath. Obviously, great information. Love seeing the positive reporting and all of that, but I do have a couple of clarifying questions or comments just to make for those that are listening to that, because as our general population may not have the passion for these numbers that you and I do. The revenues that we're talking about, the overage, all of the revenues that we saw as a favorable variance this year were one-time. With it, these are non-recurring events, and so when I take a look at speaking about the favorability, we are talking that we're in a structural deficit, of which we've mentioned, right? We came in at 1.25 million short for this year, and those revenues that we really saw come in are one-time. Now, granted, they enhance our fund balance, and as we start to take a look at rolling into the next budget cycle, that fund balance, right, is not set up or established for recurring revenues, right? Our current system as we stand today is not set up to absorb growing recurring expenditures. But the other clarifying piece, and Darren, this might be something for you, our policy as to where that fund balance needs to be, I thought was between 15 and 25%.
Yeah, I think that's what the policy says.
Okay, so I thought it was, I thought you'd mentioned 10 to 15% or 15.
And I did, I believe that's what is included in the footnote, so I will have to look at that, because perhaps there was a change in policy that did not get adjusted.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's accurate, 15 to 25, yeah. And we actually had, I think we had, when we first started out, it was 15%. When we were first run, we had like a rainy day fund of, we had like, I think our fund balance was $250,000, and that was back in like 2000, I don't know, 4 or 5, something like that. And I think we originally set maybe it for 10 or 15%. That was the original policy that we wrote, but I think we had bumped it up, so I think your footnote is really of the original policy, and maybe that footnote was just picked up from a previous year or whatever.
Sure.
So
Verify that.
Are you looking that up right now, Sherry, to see?
I'm trying to.
Yeah.
I've found it, Mr. Como.
Is it 15 to 25?
It's 15, and it shall not drop below 10.
Okay.
It's a recommended.
Oh, so it was,
So,
that was accurate, 10 to 15?
15%.
Yes.
Minimum.
And that's not of the entire fund balance, it's certain categories of the fund balance. So not everything is looked at when looking at that percentage.
When we look at that, we only look at that unassigned portion of it.
So, and I might sound like a broken record over year, but what this has allowed us to do, as we've, one of the positives of having a healthy fund balance is we don't have to do a short-term borrow to meet our cash flow needs during the year. There were some years where we were borrowing, $800,000, $900,000 a year just so that we could meet our cash flow needs, cut our checks to pay our employees and to pay our bills during the year, and
I think it was 24 million for cash flow.
I'm sorry.
Interest
I was,
expense might have been 800,000.
yeah, I was thinking of the interest expense, yeah. So how much it cost us, not the total amount that we need to borrow, but it was, 24 to 27 million is what we'd have to borrow, interest being upwards of, $800,000, $900,000 a year. That's when interest rates were much higher. But, I mean, that would come out of, then, that interest would come out of our general fund. And it essentially was just to borrow money to make sure we could pay our bills during the year. So the healthy fund balance also allows us to do other things in a comfortable manner.
Just,
Go ahead.
it's the timing's right, I don't want to steal your thunder.
Go ahead.
In terms of fund balance in general, I'd also ask the board to remember, for those of you who are on the board or following what we were doing during COVID, in April of 2020, our strategy at that point was to accumulate as much fund balance as possible. That was when we decided not to pay out vendors who weren't performing services anymore. We laid off our aid employees to save costs because we didn't know what the future would hold, and none of us thought it would last as long as it did, but during that time, we tried to accumulate as much fund balance because we knew once we came out of it, which is where we are now, the demands on our budget would be greater. So there was a policy contingency to that, but there was also a COVID strategy and plan put in place to provide as much protection to our financial position as possible. And I think that worked out well. And also, and I'm glad you followed up with the one-time revenue, because when people look at our financials, they're going to go, how were you off that much? We didn't know TIF 14 was going to close. We have no control over when that closure happens. We simply got a check. The governor released COVID funds that was kind of mentioned in July, never mentioned again until December when we received the funds. We got our unemployment reimbursement going back to when we laid off the aides in 2020, finally in this fiscal year. We had, so let's say at this point, we started wondering, are we getting reimbursed for the unemployment compensation? We had an insurance claim, and it seems like there was one other, FEMA, which we've never worked with in our COVID response. We had filed the claim for reimbursement of expenditures.
I think we're one of the few districts in the state that received money from FEMA. Is
And we're
that
one of the
correct?
few, and I think probably one of the more aggressive ones in dealing with FEMA. But again, it's the federal government. We had no idea, and all of this came in one fiscal year. And now we're looking at, like for this year, a lot of our fund balance is being used for trying to keep our employee compensation somewhat close to inflation via stipends and things like that. So all of it's part of a larger plan than, so I'd ask anyone who's watching this, don't focus on our financials solely. It's a very valid question for them to ask of us. But really, we're looking at a 2 or 3 year budget cycle to get us to a place where hopefully we're more, not that we're not stable now, but more certainty around our financials.
Yeah, so this is playing out over the course of the next few years.
Yeah, and it's, like I said, it's
Not the past few years,
conversation
but the
started in
next few
2020.
years. Yes.
And it'll run till 25, maybe 25, 26.
Mrs. Kozlowski?
Just last follow-up so that I don't continue to derail, but I think it is important that we all understand what we're facing, right? And I think for the clarification on the fund balance, because our community will also ask, well, how are we doing that? We're not in a position that we are able to excessively be able to support that, and I think it was really good when we estimated the operational costs for us over a day, a month, a week are excessive, that if we ever had to eat into this fund balance, it would not last us more. I think the last estimate was about 3 months. So in fairness, right, that is a very real picture. And then the last comment that I just wanted to highlight was really talking about the beauty of our capacity to borrow. Okay, so in the coaching that I would do with students or even my own daughters is you may have credit available. That does not mean that you tap it. And taking a look at where we're at right now, we're not at a point where, looking to borrow for operational or infrastructure is a place that this district is at.
And just to provide scale for what we're currently doing, the board authorized the use of $2.5 million, almost $2.6 million of fund balance this year, primarily for staff one-time stipends in lieu of ongoing wage adjustments, site carryover, and then authorized, which isn't reflected in our financials, the use of $750,000 or $700,000 of reserves for our health insurance plan, in case those would go up, to allow us to have a flat premium adjustment for this year. So
Yeah, the first stipend went out, right?
that went out
to the
December
employees?
19th. Yep.
Okay.
You're welcome, of course. So the last slide that I have included in your packet is really a very high-level summary of the reporting and insights document. Just to clarify, that document is utilized to communicate several different things. There's certain communication we need to have with you under our standards. We've included that in writing in that document. We also utilize that document to communicate any best practices, upcoming GASBs that are effective. We also utilize that document to communicate any material weaknesses or significant deficiencies. Included in that document is a material weakness regarding the fact that as part of the audit process for a brief moment of time, we become part of your internal control structure because we prepare the audited statements. So again, not something that's unusual or not normal. Most organizations we audit have that. Very happy to say, though, no material audit adjustments, so that's a very positive. Couple smaller type audit adjustments, but nothing of any significance. So a very positive result there. As I noted...
Wendy, can I just jump in on that?
Of course.
Because this is an annual thing. How many, as a percentage of your clients, how many districts complete their own financial statements? Just to
How many of my... If I look at I have roughly 75 municipal clients.
Do any of them complete their own?
Milwaukee Public Schools does.
Okay,
So
one.
if you want to put that in perspective, yes. But I would say out of 75, I've got 5 that do their own.
And I'll add that Heather was just at a conference where DPI spoke to this, and Heather, do you mind just, they said...
It was 292, sorry.
Yeah, come on. Thank you,
I believe
Heather.
there's over 400 districts in the state of Wisconsin. 292 districts regularly do not complete financial statements. They have their auditors do it.
And that's surprising. I would have thought that number would actually have been higher. So I don't know who they are, but they're not our clients. So...
They want to be. What's your email?
Yeah. Nope. Keeping that secret. Again, a good portion of that is our required communication. Again, nothing I need to draw to your attention, does highlight the various estimates that are included within the district statements. We talked about those as part of the OPEB and pension discussion. The only other item I will note in that document, I referenced this earlier, there is a new governmental accounting standard that the district needs to consider for FY23. Kind of piggybacks GASB 87, it's GASB 96. And it's the accounting for subscription-based IT services. So something, again, very similar process. You will inventory those various items and ultimately need to determine if it has a material impact. Most likely not, but again, have to go through the methodology. So I just wanted to note that because that is something that has to be done for FY23. On the very last page of the handout, I have included my email address, my direct line. Happy to talk through any of this information, our audit process, what we look like with any of you, or what we look at with any of you. Please feel free to reach out. But again, at this point, I'd be happy to answer any additional questions you may have.
Thank you. It was well done. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, from a board responsibility perspective, I believe this is one of the most important things that the board does, is hire an auditor, because there's no way, well, Carrie, you might want to go and spend all your time auditing, but we don't have the expertise nor the staff to do our own audit, and so we've decided to hire, and we need to, as you had mentioned, our district needs to do this by state statute, and to receive the highest levels of assurances, it doesn't get any better than that from your auditor. I appreciate you sharing and going through all of the reports, and just because we're in the world of education, and tradition that we've had in the past is to translate your auditor's grade into an A, B, C, D, F grade. Well, maybe not an E, but we can skip that one.
So I would say the financial results for the district for the year, your ending results, not taking into account the various things that were spoke about, the one-time revenue sources and that type of thing, I would say you're an A.
I appreciate that, because there's a lot that goes into this report, and our, general audience, and even some of us, it's a lot to absorb, and knowing that we're doing well, I think is important.
And I think one thing to note too, that A grade, there's so much more to an audit than just numbers. I share the information, but we do a lot of evaluation of the district's internal controls, making sure that there's the proper checks and balances in place. And again, to have a material weakness only because we prepare the financial statements is relatively unheard of. A lot of our clients, they can't achieve proper segregation of duties or similar type of control deficiencies. It's very positive that the district has accomplished that segregation and done so in a relatively cost-efficient way. Also, no material audit adjustments, again, technically unheard of in our industry. Most of our clients have many journal entries. So again, a very favorable result. So although your numbers all came in very positive, there's a lot of ancillary things that come into the audit process. The no compliance findings on your federal and state programs. Again, millions of dollars that people are following the proper compliance requirements. All of those factor into that positive grade.
Well, this team has taken seriously any suggestions in the past that auditors have made. And in addition to that, this team constantly works to just improve itself. And the pride that you take each and every day in what you do is obvious. And you should feel good about what our auditors are saying. And I think everyone thinks, well, they're just doing their job. Well, there's a good way to do your job and a not so good way to do your job. And so we appreciate all the hard effort, Dan, you and your team, Sherry, Heather, all the folks over there working hard every day to be accurate about the information that we have. And why is that important? We make a lot of decisions as a board that impacts our community, and we need to have accurate information. And we appreciate all the hard work that you do day in and out. And Wendy, we appreciate your time here this evening. Again, if any of us have any questions, and not just after tonight, or tonight, a couple weeks from now,
Of course.
you're open to
Anytime.
having us write you and get in touch with you, and that's what you're there for, and we appreciate that very much.
Problem.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Can I,
And just so everyone knows, after the board meeting on Thursday morning, we'll be posting our full financials on our website. We have a 3-year rolling history of them. We have them all, but you only have to go back so far, I think. So for anyone who wants to see that document, it'll be out there for, and you make a good point. This is the board's audit. This isn't our audit or anything like this. This is your chance to see the performance of us. But Wendy's also, and her staff are a resource throughout the year. I know she comes here once a year, but random questions are often fired off to her about, hey, how should we do this? Or I'm thinking, just the other day, I said, I'm thinking of doing this. So thanks to them for 12 months of help.
Well, that's an example of what I was saying is you and your team are proactive. You guys are wondering how to get better. And that's not always seen. And Jess, I didn't mean to leave you out of the list there. But it's not just the pride. It's you guys want to deliver good and accurate information, and appreciate that very much. Yes, Sherry.
can I add, I just want to give a special thank you to Heather, because Heather was with our district about a week before my very untimely disappearance for the summer, and she did an amazing job. I mean, absolutely amazing. So thank you, Heather, for all of the work that you did.
When Heather started, I told Jess, you're in charge of finishing the budget, and Heather, you're in charge of the audit. And neither of them have done either one of those until, like I said, we got to go each other really quick. So it really worked out well.
Thank you. Thank you, Wendy. Appreciate it very much. Moving on to our budget monthly report. Ms. Stack.
right. Looking at the revenue, the interest rates continue to be very favorable. I don't know how long that will last, but the LGIP interest wasn't available at the time of this report, but this last month, there was another $166,000 to add to this total, so
I think I saw over 4%.
it was 4.05% for LGIP. So that continues to come in above budget, what we expected. In some of the items where we're running behind, where it looks like we're running behind, I did a deeper dive, and that was mainly into student fees, rental, and textbook fees. And I looked at the history of timing of when these things come in for the year, and I think we're in good position for all of those, because if trend holds true, we'll still be getting those revenues in by the end of the year. So very happy with those numbers. Interdistrict, just more e-achieve tuition. Intermediate sources, no activity. State sources, we received our bilingual bicultural aid, and the second installation of our equalization aid. The bilingual bicultural is a one-time annual payment that is based on the percentage of spending from the year before. Federal sources, we had ESSER 2, ESSER 3, and Title I grants Title IV grants being paid. Otherwise, we're a little bit higher on receipts than overall from last year at this time, but I think we're in good position revenue-wise. Expenses for Fund 10, our December payrolls were looking really good. If anything, we're going to come out a little bit ahead on Fund 10 salary and benefits, under budget a little bit, which we'll need later. We'll talk about that a little bit later. In Fund 27, purchase services, our top three areas were personal service, utilities, and pupil travel, which was we've already talked about for student billing being late. The majority of the personal services were to Playworks, and then the digital mapping, which we've already discussed. So everything else was kind of a lot of smaller purchases under that category. Non-capital textbooks continue to be a spend. The money was budgeted from ESSER though, so that was an anticipated and budgeted expenditure. Minimal spending in capital objects. We had a quarterly insurance payment. No transfers in December. Overall, we're right at the same percentage this year as we were at last year. That's for Fund 10. Any questions on Fund 10 before I jump onto Fund 27? Okay. Fund 27, for revenue, we received our second categorical aid and a small payment for Project Search. Project Search is something new that you'll be maybe hearing more about. Project Search is a collaborative effort with a county resource and the Waukesha Memorial Hospital. We have a teacher who teaches at Waukesha Memorial Hospital. It's part of the transition program for part of a transition program, not our transition program. But for special education, we provide the teacher and the salary, and we do collect tuition from other schools and county agencies that are sending people there. And the goal of the program is to get these people trained with a lot of the transition skills, plus the ability to be able to work at the hospital then. It's a very cool program, and
That's pretty exciting.
it is very exciting. So I think it's a real worthy program. I believe there's 10 to 12 students, Heather, was it? 8, thank you. Involved in it right now. And do we just have one of our own? I can't remember, one of our own, the rest are coming from other agencies and school districts, so. Any questions on Project Search before I move on? Okay. Expenses, salary and benefits. After the December payrolls was run, we're starting to see a trend of being over budget in special education special education salary and benefits. And part of that is it's very fluid with special education because of the services that students need. It's hard to pinpoint the exact budget at the time we're doing budgeting, but we're going to have to watch it. Hopefully there's, where we're coming under budget, and Fund 10 will help offset these extra expenditures in Fund 27, but they've needed more aides this year than they have in the past, and other positions. So we're keeping an eye on it. We'll continue to report on it. Purchase services, mainly pupil travel and tuition. Otherwise, mainly supplies for the rest of the expenditures. We're at 37% of our spend for special education versus normally at 35%. Any questions on that before I move on to the health insurance?
Anyone? Okay.
All right, so health insurance continues to be in a very good position. So we added an additional $386,000 to our surplus for our health insurance. So we're at 6.3 million. So we are getting to a point where we're going to have to really look at what do we do with those funds? We need to have a strategic plan, and I discussed this, that we'll be moving forward.
So, Darren, would you recommend that in a couple months to be looking at that? Would you want us to discuss that sooner than that, or?
Probably in March, I would think we'd have enough true hard claims data to start, and we'll have an estimate from H&I on our renewal of the funding rates. But I'll just tell you kind of the overarching thought of mine is to use those surpluses to keep health insurance flat, because that's a major step forward in our structural deficit and how we calculate that. Because I usually budget about a 5% increase, which equals about $1 million of cost right out of the gate, a 5% increase. So that's part of our strategy, but these numbers keep to be favorable, so maybe there's other things, but that's my goal. If I could get 2 or 3 more years of flat health insurance renewals, I would take that in a heartbeat, so.
There are limits as to what we can do with it. It's not like we can just take it and use it to offset any other program other than the health insurance.
Yeah, so we just can't throw it back at any program.
It has a lot of
Yeah.
restrictions to
It has to stay within being used for health insurance purposes in one way or the other. But that 6.3 million is above our actual our reserve that we put aside, and that's the 5.3 million. So we have our 5.3 million reserve that we keep as a fund balance, and then we have this building 6.3 million on top of that. And that number at the end of the year really should just be our IBNR, but that's why we need to come up with a strategic plan and how to use it, because DPI will want to know what we're going to do with it.
Okay. Other questions on healthcare?
And dental insurance, we used a little bit of our surplus, but we're still in a really good position, but it's good that we're not continuing to build it there, because we have a very healthy surplus in the dental insurance already, 1.3 million sitting in there, so it went down from, sorry, I must have added something at the end here, because actually we're up another $30,000, I apologize, $40,000. But we're in good position with dental too, so I think that's really all.
Okay, any other questions on where we're at as far as our current budget goes? All right, thank you. Thank you, Sherry, for that. And we're at the point where we're going to update ourselves on where we stand with the ESSER funds. There's really no change, right? Not much.
The only thing
Tiny.
we're seeing changes now, everything's been assigned, except for the final T&L approval of those items you've already seen, but you wanted to wait till, because they were all supposed to hit the next, or in year 2 of our conversation. So those will be coming forward in February or March, the T&L. So once that's, assuming the board approves what they've already looked at, the only approvals you'll have, or changes you'll have in this report are assigned to paid for. You know what I mean? Appeals will be cut. But we've added some charts to the website and all of that to give people a better, kind of a quick snapshot, because it's a lot of numbers. And I think that was recommended at the last board meeting by Mark, if I recall. But, so yeah, it's just a quick update just to keep you in line.
Can you take us through when and how we receive revenues and when and how we disperse of those? Just a basic process?
ESSER related?
Yeah, ESSER related.
A grant type process. We expend money and then we file claims based on those expenditures. So it's as we go on those, and we're doing, with the dollars involved here, we're doing these claims on a very frequent basis. So it'll follow our, you'll have a month or two delay in our cash flow out, the cash flow will come in, so it's a zero-sum game budget-wise.
Is there any particular reporting that we have to do, like on a monthly or a quarterly basis on this, or? Yeah.
And we have to do some specific reporting.
Okay. First time dealing with them, so not sure how that, in the FEMA stuff, is that similar? How the FEMA funds are handled, or how does that
FEMA was our expenditures.
Process work?
And it was a reimbursement process, just approval process, but it was very lengthy, and they were making it up as they were going, on top of us making it up as we were going. And those claims were submitted in the 2021 school year and hit our books in the 22 school year, thank you for my years mixed up. So it was it's one of those things where you'd have conversations, you think you'd all have all square away, and then 3 months later, oh yeah, this changed, or you got reassigned to a different agent, and I don't think we want our Alberta funding running through FEMA. We'll take it, but.
It's very different funding, and it was more heavy at the front end as far as proving your expenditures and going through that, so there was no reporting afterwards, other than once we justified all of our claim, then they gave us their money, versus the grants like ESSER, where they give us an entitlement and say, this is the amount you get, and then we spend it, and then at the end, we have to more justify. And as Wendy had indicated, part of our audit includes those type of federal programs.
Okay. Anything else? Yes, Dr. Piasek.
Thank you. I do appreciate, since we started looking at these pie charts, just the visual representation of how we invested this money. I just also wanted to remind everybody that we've far exceeded the minimum required allocation to learning recovery. So that 6.5 million that we've actually put into learning recovery, high-quality curricular resources. And I know that with TNL, we're coming back with that last request, as we requested to do last year. And even that, I think Mrs. Landish and the team has done a really good job of updating that to reflect current needs based on what we're assessing necessary for our students. So I just really appreciate the thoughtfulness that's gone into all that, and how we've been able to really protect a large percentage of those resources for our students.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments on the ESSER funds? All right, thank you. Moving on to other business, any suggestions for topics to be added to our agenda in upcoming months? Yes, Dr. Piasek.
Thank you. And this is not time sensitive, but I think it would be helpful if at the district level we could review our athletics department expenditures, just overall, the fees that are coming in, the costs that are going out.
Yeah, a lot of that is, we see the details through the consent agenda, but we don't really spend a lot of time talking on it unless we have a specific question, so.
Yeah, and there's a lot that happens with respect to coaching costs, and I just think it would be helpful to have that visual. And again, it is not urgent, so if we have other pressing issues, and I know we do as we kind of roll into the end of the year, but I think as we think about budget development and to be strategic about making sure that we protect those resources. I know our booster clubs are very active and bring a lot of great resources into the district as well. So I'd just be looking to understand that a little bit better.
Can I ask, are you looking, so not just what the district provides, but the like the Fund 21 portion too, where they're doing their fundraising and that type of thing and paying for some of their things out of their fundraising money? Because that we have at a level per club. We could also
We don't need to look at the individual clubs.
bring it up to the school level.
Yep.
The operational.
Yep. Yes.
operational budget
Thank you.
expenditures.
Mr.
Yeah, we
McCaffrey?
used to get that report, but that report was broken down by sport. That's what we used to get. And then you could see what every sport costs.
That
And then
was
they
when
broke
we
it down
had,
as participant.
I think that's what we need.
Yeah, that's what, right.
and
Is that
that's,
what you're looking for?
yeah, that disappeared when the activity, what you're talking about is
We used
the
to go through
activity
the huge-
account reports, because that's when everything was in Fund 60, and that was,
Decentralized, right?
it had to be,
Broken out.
it had to be broken out, and now it's in Fund 21. We can still report on it.
Yeah, right.
We can still report on it if that desire is there to
Yeah.
see that level at a
Yeah.
sport.
That's the report we used to get. It used to
Yep.
be by sport, participants.
Yep, and when the
How
one
much it
GASB
costs.
rule changed that, and we moved it all to Fund 21, that changed.
So is that what you're looking for?
Well, that would be delightful, but if the accounting practices have changed, then I would be open to starting with the available information, perhaps at a school level or at a sport level, but at the athlete level, I'm not looking for that at this time.
Yeah, we'll take a swipe at that and see. We'll come back with something and we can always add on.
Thank you.
Any other topics? All right, thank you. We do have a need to go into executive session, so I would be looking for a motion to do so.
I motion to adjourn to executive session pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 19.85, Parent 1, Parent E, for deliberating or negotiating the purchasing of public properties, the investing of public funds, or conducting other specified public business wherever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session. Transportation contract.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. McCaffrey. Please take the roll call vote, Jess.
Ms. Kozlowski,
Aye.
Mr. McCaffrey,
Aye.
Dr. Piasek,
Aye.
and Mr. Como.
Aye, passes 4-0. We'll go immediately into closed session, and we will not reconvene into open session on this. So I hope everyone has a nice evening tonight, those of you listening to us and those of you in the audience.